Welcome, everyone, to the Show of Requirements, a Harry Potter podcast available everywhere you get podcasts and also available on YouTube for the Harry Potter Fanatics YouTube channel. My name is David. I'm your host for today, and I am with, I feel like you're now the co-host.
Almost.
Of the Show of Requirement. We're joined again by Cole Harris. Beautiful things are happening in the lives of Abby and Spencer as they now both have had their children, and it's an amazing thing, but obviously they have to step aside and take care of their kids now. So it's just going to be me and Cole. And I know everyone's asking the question, when are we having kids?
I'm going to skip out on that question.
Yeah.
It's on a need-to-know basis, and I don't even need to know.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm with you on that, for sure. But we are just going to have a great time. We're obviously covering still the Goblet of Fire, and this is actually the final episode of our read-through of the Goblet of Fire. And boy, what a finish to this book. We'll get later on to where we rank them in our read-through so far. But Cole, just give me just your initial thoughts after finishing this section.
This is really this is where it hits hard and fast and furious. What is it? 31 to the end.
Yeah.
Just to jog my memory, because it's been a few weeks. Yeah, so it's the entirety of the third task, and epilogue to this book. Does it have an epilogue? Not really.
Not
yeah,
really.
It does.
I mean, it finishes the year, but
it finishes the year. But man, this is where it gets real serious real quickly, and they don't really let up for the rest of the series after this.
Yeah, so obviously I think we talked about this before on the podcast, but there is a level of just a level of innocence in the first three books. Even if you want to look at Prisoner of Azkaban and say, oh, it gets a little bit dark in some areas, especially with Sirius Black and his story and Lupin and all of that. But this is the book to where it really just takes a turn. And it's like, yeah, we get it. Sorcerer's Stone is a kid's book, but now this is the real good stuff.
So I let you guys know this, that I'm rereading the books for the first time. After I read this one, I went back on Hoopla and got started with Philosopher's Stone or Sorcerer's Stone, and now I'm on Chamber of Secrets, and now I'm sitting here like, man, they're such kids. This is just such kid stuff. But then knowing how it all ends, like, this is that moment where it stops being a kid's book.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so let's just go ahead and dive into the reading, and then we're going to talk about, where this ranks up in comparison to those other books, especially with the quick change of theme and tone and all of that. But we're gonna go ahead and start with chapter 31, called The Third Task. Okay, so we just kind of jump straight into it after Harry tells Ron and Hermione everything that he has seen and the pensive, and leaving out the part about Neville's parents, and they talk about it in great length. Rita Skeeter also comes out with an article of how Harry fainted in class, as we all know, because of his scar hurting and this and this and that. And Hermione seems to have figured out what it has been going on, like how Rita has been jumping into these conversations, but she's not actually physically there. And so she's, again, that storyline has kind of taken off and done its own thing and everything like that. But then we get to one of my favorite sections of this chapter, and it's after breakfast. All the champions are going and they're meeting with their families, and I think Minerva's the one who gets them all together,
Yes.
um, to go and grabs the champions so that way they can meet their families. And Harry, like all of us, are just like, well, the only family that I actually have are the Dursleys, and they're for sure not going to come and support me and be there with me. And we get this nice surprise, but it shouldn't have been a surprise at all. We have the Weasleys, Molly and Bill, coming to be with Harry and to watch him. And so he spends time with both of them, and, going around the grounds and all of that kind of stuff. Um, and then I think within all of that, um,
One of my
we get
favorite.
this like little scene with Hermione coming into the place, and
Mhm.
Molly is just kind of like hostile to her at first, and then Harry's like, that you don't actually believe all those articles from Witches Weekly, do you? And Molly's just like, no, of course not. And then she's like nicer to her like after that, but then we get to the actual third task itself. But Cole, what was your favorite part just from the section so far?
um, One part that really stuck out to me is or was the part where we get the description of Bill Weasley, because
Mm,
we haven't really met Bill before. We met Charlie.
right.
We haven't met Bill before. And then there's like the just the contrast between him physically and the way he carries himself as opposed to the other Weasleys that we know, Weasley
Yeah.
children that we know, being Percy, George and Fred, Ron and Ginny, just completely different. Um, Obviously, no one's going to be like Percy, no one's going to be like Fred and George, but um, he's described as being a little bit stouter. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Um,
Hmm.
and then there was like a comment made when they're in the room, where he keeps like making eye contact with Fleur, and it's like, if you know, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, great writing for this chapter, and I remember being surprised when it was the Weasleys, because I was trying to imagine the Dursleys. Will the Dursleys show up? When I first read this, like, they're gonna
Yeah.
be so out of place.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I think I'd seen Order of the Phoenix by then, the movie, and I was like, no, there's no way, because I feel like after if they'd have gone to the school, they'd have been like, oh, we're so sorry, Harry. Place is wonderful. Maybe. Who knows?
Maybe. I highly doubt it.
The world will never know.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot of what I took away from that section of reading.
Yeah. So, okay. Then we have the third task kind of play out. Again, there's a pretty good amount of differences between um, what took place in the film and what took place in the book. I think it's pretty much hands down. I think even Spencer would agree that the book version is better, just because there's a lot more
Yes.
details and a lot more things happening in the book than in the film itself. I mean, you're talking about uh, like Harry's start and his path is remarkably quiet, but then he runs into a boggart that's disguised as a
Hmm.
Dementor, which he's able to get through easily, of course. And then at one point, he runs through a mist that temporarily turns the world upside down.
Hmm.
And then, as he hears Fleur's scream, he runs forward, and he runs into Hagrid's Scroots, which Cedric had actually run into before. Another beautiful thing about this book is that you just see a lot of Cedric and Harry's moments in the third task, which is really great because they're like friendly to each other, but at the same time it's a competition, uh,
Hmm.
and all of that, which is great to see. Um, and then Harry hears Crumb mutter Crucio, and then he hears Cedric scream, which is insane. Um, And then Harry burns a hole in the hedge. He saves Cedric by hitting Crumb with the stupefy. They continue their through the maze. A really cool thing that I love this. The Sphinx.
The Sphinx, yes.
It's amazing. Answers her riddle. And what was really cool is that like I was listening to it, and as I was hearing, I was just like, oh man, what could it be? Like I was trying to solve the riddle myself because I was just like, man, I don't remember what it was. Luckily I was not. I'll just go ahead and out myself. I was not smart enough to even come close to figuring it out, I don't think. But then after that, it's the Triwizard Cup. He and Cedric both run for it. A huge spider comes in, which they defeat together. Harry breaks his leg in the process, and they just have this back and forth of, no, you take you deserve the cup. Like, no, you deserve the cup. We helped each other out. No, we're even. All this different kinds of stuff until they decide to just take it together. And the chapter ends as we find out that it is a port key.
A port key. Now I'm going to one-up the book and the movie on the third task. The Lego game does a fantastic job of the third task. They make it really interesting because they make it a really complex maze. Where if you go, you have to choose the paths in the right order, because if not, it brings you right back into the middle. So
really?
Like you go left path, I think. So like left path, you come back down the middle. You go down the middle path, you come back down the middle. You go down the right path, and it takes you to the right place, the next section of the maze.
Wow.
But it also does include the it doesn't include the blast-ended scroots, but it does have the acromantulas and the Sphinx. Of course, the Sphinx can't give you a riddle.
Yeah.
Because it's all just...
So I guess do you have to just defeat it?
No, you have to bring it a spider.
Interesting.
So you do still have to figure out the riddle.
Right.
Oh, and then the hedge moves kind of like it does in the movie, where you can turn around and the turn you just made isn't there. So I thought the hedge was a lot of fun, combining both the movie and the book. Or the game was. But yeah. Yeah, super cool. Then we get to chapter 32, Flesh, Blood, and Bone. And what a chapter. Pretty much the same thing as in the film. With Harry and Cedric arriving at an eerie graveyard really far away from Hogwarts. Coming toward them, they see a hooded man carrying what looks like to be a baby. Harry's scar starts hurting, and he's not able to see, he hears a voice say, "Kill the spare." Kill the spare.
Someone saying Avada Kedavra. Cedric is killed instantly by this point.
My boy.
I forgot to say this in the third task chapter of... I have no... I'm glad for the change in the film of Arthur, what's his name?
Amos
Diggory, because he is an absolute
horrible
dirtbag in the book.
He is.
Just
especially at he just keeps giving Harry the side eye. Well, you beat him in Quidditch, that should be good enough. When they're in the room talking to the families. Yeah.
I love, and again, it's another reason why I love Molly so much, is because she stood up for Harry in that moment, which is really, really cool. And again, Molly, most of the time, is just a rock star in these books. But yeah, Amos, man, just a jerk in the third test. But anyway, yes, my boy died. Which is really sad, because I think what the previous chapter did very much so it gets you to care more and more about Cedric. We spend a lot of time with him in that previous chapter. So when we get to his death in this chapter, chapter 32, like it means something. It's pretty significant. Now, I could be wrong, and it's not a huge deal at all. I thought it really would have been interesting if Cedric would have, if they would have kept like part of the first half of this chapter and tacked it on to the third task and have the chapter end on Cedric's death. Because the pause was really weird in the book of just like, yep, Cedric's dead. Lord Voldemort, like continuing, like, or
very sad. Anyways,
yeah, but pretty much the rest of the chapter finishes out as it does in the movie of the ritual, Tom Riddle coming back to, or Voldemort coming back to life, Wormtail speaking and walking through it of bones of the father, unwillingly given, the flesh of the servant willingly given, and then blood of the enemy, all that kind of stuff.
Forcibly taken.
Beautiful line. There's just moments in this, and especially towards the end of the book, in the chapter, The Parting of the Ways, to where Dumbledore just drops a really hot line, and I love it. This section just has a ton of those. But obviously, at the end of this chapter, we see Voldemort return to a body.
It's a really short chapter, like
really short,
636 to 643. So it's not even 10 pages.
Right. Yeah, it goes pretty quick. One of the chapters that does not go very quickly is the next one, chapter 33, the Death Eaters.
This one, this one actually had me laughing.
Okay, why so?
It's just because a majority of this is Voldemort monologuing.
Yeah.
Like stereotypical comic book villain monologuing. And it goes on for pages.
Yeah, very much so.
Like, what is it? The Incredibles? Oh, he's monologuing.
Yeah. It's really long. It's just so long, just talking about the fact that he had been in hiding for so long. He's been waiting for his Death Eaters to come to him. It's really crazy when one of the Death Eaters kind of throw themselves at Voldemort's feet, pleading for mercy and this, because none of them went to go to find him and search for him and didn't stand by him. They weren't willing to go to Azkaban for him, and like all this kinds of stuff. It's just and then him just being, you get to see his cruelty in this, because he performs the Cruciatus curse at this person. See the conversations with Lucius Malfoy. And then he talks about his plan of bringing back the Dementors from Azkaban, bringing back the Giants into the fold, of rebuilding the army. He talks about one of his most faithful servant, who is not among them because he's at Hogwarts. And it's through the
three, actually.
Yeah, because there's one, the faithful servant, one who wasn't coming, and the third person is someone who he knows is fleeing. He knows that he's running. It's Gargaroff, and he knows that he's running away. And we already know his fate already.
Here's my question about Karkaroff that I never really thought of until we read this. How did someone from Bulgaria fall into a British uprising?
Well, I think that's a fair question.
Was he visiting? Or
I have no idea. I think also another question that falls into this has to do with like the even like Makuza,
Mm-hmm.
or of like no one from America also was like in on this, and
Right.
I because the explanation that I would have before Fantastic Beasts and all of that is like, well, he's into that war because I feel like that area is also where Voldemort would explore, um, would also make
Mm,
his presence known, and he knows that that's where the Dark Wizard School is, and Karkaroff probably went to Durmstrang, so he goes there. Actually, this is what I'm thinking now. Is the reason why how he got kind of caught up into all of that. It's just
mm,
Durmstrang is just a dark school, like just in
right.
general. Um, it's the Slytherin of the wizarding like schools.
Sorry to say it, America's the Hufflepuff.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Um, oh, that would actually be interesting in sorting the schools of the wizarding world into Hogwarts houses, like where they would be.
That would be fun. That would be a
Spencer, that's
fun
an
episode.
episode. Yeah,
There we go.
we made it. So, so America's Hufflepuff, Durmstrang is Slytherin, and we'll figure out where all the other ones are. But I think what I originally thought was just like, oh well, Voldemort's conquering the world, so of course
Right.
Kargolf get in on that, but then that would be where the question is about. Okay, well, what about
America.
America? America. Um, but I'm
I mean, is it a mirror of like Britain? Like, because Britain at one point controlled most of the world, the
at
known
this,
world.
yeah, but at
Is
this
this like
point,
a reflection
I
on
don't.
that? Like
I,
it starts there and spreads? I don't know.
I
This is
think
a
the
weird rabbit hole.
yeah, I think the best way to explain this is to say that the Fantastic Beasts and all of that was not thought of
No.
during this time. So the addition of Fantastic Beasts and all of that really muddies the waters a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and so, Spencer, if you're listening to this, this is me acknowledging the lore plot holes that exist with Fantastic Beasts. I'm acknowledging that they're there. They really are. I'm still optimistic. Still Jude Law for Dumbledore in the live
Yes.
action in the reboot, please. Bring all this together, Warner Brothers. Come on. Anyway, so but yeah, this chapter pretty much ends the same way. Again, Voldemort kind of discloses his history, of like what has happened. They talk about this, and this is kind of where I think I want to switch to Hogwarts Legacy for a second. And the reason why I say that is because Voldemort starts talking about this kind of ancient magic, this old magic that's being used, by Lily and then James,
Mm-hmm.
or not James,
Harry.
Dumbledore.
Dumbledore.
Okay. And then Harry will use it in the Deathly Hallows, which I think we talked about in the Hogwarts Legacy section of like history. And
I have no idea. I just finished the game myself, so I haven't
right,
listened to that episode.
yeah. So basically, the idea is that for Dumbledore, for Lily, she sacrificed herself for Harry, so Harry was protected. That is said to be a form of ancient magic, not necessarily the same as like what was going on in Hogwarts Legacy and during that time with
Mm-hmm.
Isadora and with uh, uh, Rackham and obviously David Gonzalez, because David Gonzalez is canon now because of Hogwarts Legacy. But
Carlo Nakamura, actually.
uh,
That's what I named my character.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, that that makes more sense than David Gonzalez like just showing up in Hogwarts. Yeah, here's this Mexican showing up.
Oh my goodness.
That makes more sense. So I'm glad you did that and you were faithful to the story than I
Oh
was.
yes.
Um, but then he talks about Albus Dumbledore also using ancient magic to protect Harry, um, and all of that, which is really really cool. Um, but then he talks about, you know, inhabiting the bodies of snakes to kind of stay alive. For then 4 years ago, he inhabited a foolish future Hogwarts teacher, which was Professor Quirrell. Um,
Hate it.
was thwarted was thwarted by Harry Potter as he was trying to pursue the Sorcerer's Stone. Voldemort was alone and weak when a Wormtail uh, went back to him and returned to him, along with Bertha Jorkins, who told him that there would be a faithful servant who would come back to him and all this kinds of stuff. And you go through the history of him and all of that. And we end this chapter with the torture of Harry for a little bit,
Mhm.
and then the duel that is about to take place.
The duel is one of my favorite parts because it played out almost word for word.
Mm-hmm.
The beginning of the duel, let's
Yeah.
put it that way. And Ralph Fiennes just he did it perfectly. Just the arrogance.
Chris.
You bow like this.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Oh, Ralph Fiennes did such a fantastic job as Voldemort. Which coincidentally enough, I just found out a couple months ago that he was also Ramesses in the Prince of Egypt, which is
Yes.
like insane. But if you really look at the cast line for that movie,
Prince of
like
Egypt is
insane.
crazy. My favorite part about
Yeah.
the Prince of Egypt is that they couldn't pick one voice for the voice of God. So
It changed,
they
yeah.
they used all the cast members' voice and made it
Hmm.
into one. That's like my favorite part about the whole movie.
Yeah.
Is like you
Yeah.
just can't choose one person. He is all of them as he is all of us.
Hmm.
If that makes
Yeah.
sense. That sounds a
Yeah.
little
No, it does.
hypocritical.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Just a
have to
little bit
erase that
heretical. Yeah.
part.
Um, but he does such a good job in the film of portraying what happens in this section in the book,
And
especially.
just wait
No,
until
sorry. Go ahead.
you find out who we have fan casted as Voldemort.
I'm not ready for this.
You're not ready for that episode.
I'm
It's
not.
going to be a wild episode.
Anyway, Priori Incantatem, chapter
Yes.
34, which we started talking about, of just being very similar to um, what the book actually did. Again, the only dueling spell that Harry knows is Expelliarmus,
Expelliarmus!
which is insane and freaky. I did love how Voldemort was taunting him for a while
Mhm.
and just playing around with him. Harry was like hiding in it, but then Harry just had this like resolve to like, no, if I'm gonna die, I'm not gonna die like a coward. I'm gonna die and face it head on. To where you have with Voldemort's killing curse, Harry with the disarming spell, those two beams meeting in the middle.
Mhm.
And then we just have this again, this beautiful scene. And I think that the film did such a fantastic job in doing this and doing it well. I almost want to say that the film was better.
I think I'm going to agree with you on that because the way that the book describes it is a little
Mm-hmm.
freaky, where it's like a hand popped out of the wand and like pulled itself out and a body flopped on the ground.
Yeah, it was a little bit weird.
And
The
it
only
was
thing,
Cedric.
yeah, um, I would not have been said, if Harry Potter had music in the background of their audiobooks, it would have been like dun dun dun.
Yes.
Would have been insane. But what we're supposed to hear is like the beautiful sound of of Phoenix music, which I thought was super super cool. But
matching wand cores.
Yeah, it would have been really really cool in that. And so Cedric shows up. Frank Bryce, the old Muggle caretaker. Bertha Jorkins shows up, which I'm just like, I really don't care about you or the caretaker, but I did care about Harry's parents showing up. That was a beautiful scene, and I loved it. And each of them is telling them that they need to hold on. His mother tells him that once he lets go, that they'll linger long enough to give him enough time to return to the Portkey and to Hogwarts. With Cedric asking that he takes his body back. Take my body back to my parents. Take my body back. Which he does. And I think that the book does it better in this section, in the whole of him escaping kind of deal. I think it's done really cool with the Death Eaters chasing him, Voldemort saying, no, he's mine, like all this kind of stuff. But it's just really cool. Just the way that this scene ends, I thought it was done. It was done very, very well. Love the writing in this. So, chapter 35, Veritaserum. This one,
ooh,
talking about,
this one gets
exposition. I'm going to say this. This one we'll just talk about our favorite parts. I'm going to just go ahead and share who annoyed me the most. I feel like you know who it is.
No, I want to be surprised.
Okay. The one who annoyed me the most in this chapter and throughout the entirety of this book, every time they show up, is Winky.
Oh,
Winky just gets on my nerves. She's just like, Master's gonna give you in trouble. He's getting weeds in trouble. He killed people, dude. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what is with this loyalty to evil wizards? Like, oh man, like because
fear.
I guess it's fear. But man, Winky is just so awful in this section. Just the absolute worst. The worst. But this section is just a huge, monologue exposition for Mad Eye Moody, who we find out is really Barty Crouch Jr. After, as Moody kind of shares with Harry, I'm the one who put your name into the goblet. I'm the one who did this. I'm the one who helped you out with this. You almost blew it with this. I had to overcome your stupidity because of this. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this guy did a lot. He
did.
He did a lot. And then as he was about to kill Harry, as he wanted to think about how the Dark Lord will reward me.
Well, he'd have been wrong.
Yeah. That's a great point. He would have been furious.
He would have. That would have been real bad.
Yeah, it could have been really, really bad. But then before he's able to kill him, Dumbledore comes in as only Dumbledore can, saves him. And then we get this whole scene with Veritaserum. Winky comes into the picture of it. McGonagall is told to tell a very large black dog to wait in his office, which is hilarious.
Yes.
They find the real Alistair Moody, who's kind of, man, just in a bad way. just in a really bad way. Um, and then we get this again, this huge exposition of Barty Crouch Jr. telling his story about first, how are you alive?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, how, how did you get to where you are? And all of that. But Cole, what stood out to you in this huge chapter?
It's like, again, all the monologuing, and
Yeah,
then and then a good chunk of the exposition of the whole book is done in this one chapter.
yeah,
And they saved it for the very end. It's very unusual to me that so much exposition is put into one of the final chapters of the book.
hmm
Um, in a case like this, it makes sense, and it's kind of um, they do this in the Harry Potter franchise a lot. Is
hmm
just kind of save a good chunk of the exposition. I mean, they save a good chunk of the exposition for the entire story for the last book.
hmm Yeah,
Um,
that's a fair point. Sure.
but I really enjoy this chapter. It was a
Yeah.
little confusing listening to it on audio.
hmm
And I found myself having to backtrack a couple of times.
Yeah. Yeah. I love, and people might disagree with me. I do love it when they do this in the Harry Potter franchise because it takes moments that you can't understand. They come back to it in a chapter like this to
Hmm.
explain all of it, of just like, because they do the same thing in the Sorcerer's Stone with Quirrell, of all the events leading up to that chapter, of just like, okay, well, how does how is Quirrell involved in all of this? And Quirrell explains it. I was here at this moment. In this moment, I was here. I was cut off in this situation. We get that in this chapter, which is beautiful.
Hmm.
The reason why this section is so long is because the story is significantly longer than the Sorcerer's Stone. So
Yes.
there's a lot of things to explain, a lot of things that have happened, and this chapter does a really nice job of highlighting all of these points. Again, I prefer this over the film, to
Hmm.
where even though I love, well, okay, that's not fair, because I liked David Tennant's portrayal in it. Um, I can't say that I love David Tennant in this, because it's not that I'm not a fan, but I'm not like you are. Like,
Like a big fan of
yeah,
David Tennant.
yeah, yeah,
And this
uh,
isn't this isn't my favorite David Tennant role
yeah.
either.
That's
I
fair.
don't I would say that I don't like seeing him as the bad guy. However, probably my favorite role of his is as a bad guy in Jessica
Yeah,
Jones.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, so this is the one where I prefer the book over the film. I love the exposition. I don't know if Spencer does or not. I think he does. I think there's he. I think what Spencer doesn't like is like unnecessary exposition.
Mhm.
Like, in terms of, um, oh yeah, let's go play Quidditch. Quidditch is a game in the Wizarding world, and we're like in Prisoner of Azkaban, and that's being done. Um, but I think this is really necessary, and I think it did a really great job of kind of filling in those holes of, okay, how do we get to this point? But I think the next chapter, chapter 36, the parting of the ways, for me is the best chapter in this entire book. For me, this is a section that we don't get in the film. It's one of the things that I'm looking forward to seeing in the reboot, if we get to this point, if it doesn't already get canceled at that point. Um, um, but they're talking about, um, the first section of this chapter is with Sirius, Dumbledore, and
Yes.
Harry, them explaining through what happened between the connection of the wands, all of this kinds of stuff. Fawkes cries on Harry, healing his wounds with Phoenix tears, which is always incredible to see Fawkes at any point in time. The beautiful part of this section is it's a little low key moment. Obviously, any Sirius Black reading in any book is fantastic, but Sirius going back with Harry
Snape.
in the hospital wing
Oh,
as a dog and just like laying at his feet is, I loved it. It was just such a cute moment. But then we get probably one of the best scenes of all time, in my opinion. The showdown between Fudge and everybody else.
yes.
Man, what a crazy moment. Because Fudge has lost his mind. Like, clearly just lost his mind. He doesn't believe anything that Dumbledore says, doesn't believe anything Harry says. For some reason, just him knowing what the Dementors did last year at Hogwarts. Why would you bring them back in the building? And we really find out in this conversation that is being had between everybody that Fudge is only concerned about his own image. He's only concerned about what the majority of people will think. Is focused on securing his legacy more than protecting people. Dumbledore gives him a list of things that you need to do this. You need to heed my advice and heed my warnings. And there was a specific line that Dumbledore tells to Fudge. But I'm trying to figure out what that is. Okay, I think I might have found it. Okay, yeah, here it is. I found it. It says, "You are blinded," said Dumbledore, his voice rising now, the aura of power around him palpable, his eyes blazing once more. "By the love of the office you hold, Cornelius, you place too much importance, and you always have done, on the so-called purity of blood. You fail to recognize that it matters not what someone is born, but what they grow up to be." And I was just like, those are some bars that Dumbledore dropped. It's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. I love how he says it. But just to make a long story short, or a long summary short, Cornelius and Dumbledore are at odds. There's a reason why this chapter is called The Parting of Ways, because Dumbledore is essentially parting ways with Fudge, because he's saying, if you're not going to accept this as fact, you're going to do what you're going to do, and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Period. And Fudge says this changes everything of how Hogwarts is going to be run, my involvement with Hogwarts, this and this and that. Because again, he views this as a power grab. Like, Voldemort's not the one who's ascending and growing and is available and is coming for his power. It's Dumbledore that's doing that in his mind, in his eyes. And so, man, but your thoughts on this?
Yes. It's one of those that I do forget, like you said, because it's not in the movie, and I've seen the movie about a million times. But I always think back to the next confrontation of Fudge and Dumbledore in Order of the Phoenix.
Yeah.
Where Dumbledore just kind of claps his hands and runs away.
Yeah.
But it has kind of the same energy. If you may not like Dumbledore, but he has style.
Yeah, style. Yeah, for sure.
But that's just kind of the energy. Maybe because it's in the same place. Maybe it's because Fudge and
Mm-hmm.
Dumbledore are at odds, and that's the only time that we really see them at odds in the movies.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, I thought the next section, the way that this chapter ends, is beautiful. Um, Fudge leaves in a hurry, just
Hmm.
gives Harry his money and all
Yeah,
of that
take
kind of stuff.
this.
Um, yeah, take this. Um, then Dumbledore goes into Order the Phoenix mode, to where okay, the Dark Lord's back. Let's get all our forces together. Miss Weasley is sent to get her husband and to join him in the battle. He makes Sirius and Snape shake hands to make
Hmm.
up, which they do begrudgingly.
I
Um,
like
but yeah,
Sirius turning from a dog to
yeah,
to human, and Miss
oh,
Weasley's like, "Oh my gosh, it's Sirius Black! Somebody get him!"
it's
They're like,
hilarious. I love that.
be quiet, woman."
Yeah, yeah, but it's just really really funny because once he turns back into a human, um, makes up with Snape, you get to hear about, hey, Sirius, you need to gather up all the people, and you need to do that immediately.
Hmm.
The part that I loved is when Dumbledore tells Snape to do what he knows he has to. Um, Ominous, foreshadowing, fantastic. Just loved the drop of that.
So, which is crazy now in hindsight, because I've never caught this. Voldemort knew
Mm-hmm,
that Snape's allegiances weren't with him. It's acknowledged in this book,
mm-hmm.
but yet in Deathly Hallows, he still has complete trust in him,
Which
appointing
I
him as
wish I wish
headmaster.
we could see. Yeah, I wish we could see how the conversation of him going back happened and took place.
I mean, we don't get that exact conversation, but what comes to mind is the opening for, is it Deathly Hallows Part 1 at the Malfoy Manor? Yes.
Mm-hmm,
Where Snape apparates, and they've got the Muggle Studies teacher there.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of like Snape's there, and he knows what he knows, but Voldemort's
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's because he says, I can use you
Mm-hmm.
to my own advantage. But yeah, it's just kind of crazy. And I love how this chapter ends with a moment with Molly and Harry. It's written so beautifully. He doesn't want the winnings. He doesn't want it at all. He tries to give it to the Weasleys, who they don't want it either. Um, and Harry's just overwhelmed with sadness. And when Molly puts her arms around him, Harry describes it as saying, like, I've never been hugged like this
Mm-hmm.
ever in my life before. Um, and Molly at this point, for me, can never do any wrong.
No.
We know in the Deathly Hallows that's not the case with them having to go behind her back because she won't let them go and do what they have to do. But like, I think this is a moment to where Molly fulfills a role because it's her character. It's who
Mm-hmm.
she is. Like she is Mama Bear, protecting, comforting, all of this kinds of stuff. Um, and I think it's a beautiful way to really tie up this book because obviously we get the
Mm-hmm.
finale, we get the final chapter. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it because it's pretty much to the status quo. I think the only really big notable part of this is Malfoy, Crab, and Goyle showing up in the on the train and openly supporting the Dark Lord, like which blew my mind. And to me, that's a crazy part in that entire chapter in this entire book of openly supporting the Dark Lord, openly talking about the destruction, the elimination of mudbloods and people who are on their side, half bloods, all this kinds of stuff. Um,
I think one of
and
my favorite favorite parts of this is this chapter is following that, where Fred and George enter the cabin and they all get in there and they all just shoot a bunch of curses at him. It's like, oh, and then they're exchanging notes.
yeah,
Oh, you used the jelly leg curse. Nice. I would have never thought to do that.
it yeah, it was such a fun section. Him giving them the money too was
Yes,
great because they take it, they don't care. Um, but that's the book.
that is.
It and
Oh,
it's
and then
and it's
Rita Skeeter is a bug.
oh yeah, yeah, she's a bug, which is awesome, fantastic, love it.
Because it's
Chef's
even
kiss.
talked about later, or it was mentioned
Hmm.
earlier. Like Harry
Hmm.
looked out the window and saw a bug. There was
Well,
a bug in Hermione. Crumb picked a bug out of Hermione's hair and threw it
yeah,
back into the lake.
yeah, which is I missed that. I didn't catch that. And then also like when Harry and Molly are in the middle of their embrace, and then Hermione just hits the glass window to capture it and stuff. She's like, "Sorry," like,
Sorry. I now that we're done, I gotta say
mm,
I've been reading the Jim Dale uh audiobooks.
hmm.
I hate his Hermione voice. It is the most annoying thing. Harry! I can't even do it right. I can't. It's like nails on a chalkboard to me.
It's honestly how Emma Watson should sound
It is.
because
It is.
Hermione is known to is supposed to be kind of this annoying character, and Emma Watson's Hermione is not that at all.
No.
Like it's just brilliant. It's just
Hmm.
brilliant. Um, so that's why I think Jim Dale does a great job because
He
I think
does.
he it's supposed to be annoying. Now, I haven't listened to Stephen Fry's. I don't know what his sounds like. I'm interested in
Hmm.
figuring out what that is. Maybe that needs to also be another episode. Jim Dale versus Stephen Fry, and us having like a true debate. We'll find some people who love Stephen Fry. We'll defend Jim Dale, but at the end of the day, these are two fantastic voice actors who
Hmm.
did an incredible job with both of these. But now, in talking, transitioning into
Yes.
ranking this one,
Ah,
Cole, where does this one rank? And again, this is not all time because again, we're building our list as we
we're building
go.
up.
So,
Yes.
how would you rank the first four books of the Harry Potter series?
I think it's gonna go. This would be number 3, following Prisoner of Azkaban is number 1. Um, Sorcerer's Stone is number 2. This is 3, and then Chamber of Secrets is number 4. But it's a very
Mm,
close. It's very close because as I'm rereading this, I'm discovering how well of a mystery the Chamber of Secrets was
it really
written.
was, yeah. Hmm.
It was a great mystery, very misleading. I'm
Hmm.
at the end of the book now. I'm in the Chamber of Secrets, where, to be precise, Harry finds Ginny.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's a close matchup between the
Yeah,
two.
yeah. So I think the way that I would rank them is obviously Prisoner of Azkaban. It's a solid book. Then I have the Goblet of Fire, um, and then I have Sorcerer's Stone, and then the Chamber of Secrets. I think even though the Sorcerer's Stone is iconic, I think so many things happen in the Goblet of Fire.
Mm,
It's so detailed, and there's just so much story in this, and it all feels natural.
mm-hmm.
That it really is great. I think, and I know people disagree. I think that um, the film is what brings this down. I think just when we're
Interesting.
talking about the Goblet of Fire in general, um, it because I think some people loved how different the Goblet of Fire is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm still one of those people who would really consider and really think about the fact that I love. That's kind of why I'm okay with the reboot, is because if it's going to be more faithful to the story, like that's what I want. Like I'm
Right.
all for people trying new things, but with books, if there's a story that's written and it's supposed to be a certain way, I want to keep it that certain way. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people feel that way. So when you're looking at the Goblet of Fire and you're looking at book to film, the translation is not that great.
No,
Um,
it's not.
and so maybe that's why people put down the Goblet of Fire, because it's not consistent across the board, and maybe in other people's rankings they're considering that. I think in a bad way. I think,
Mm-hmm.
the films are the films, the books are the books, and I think the Goblet of Fire is just a tremendous story with so many characters, so many backgrounds that are like information that's developed throughout. It has a beautiful uh, chapter to where it ties it all together and everything
Mm-hmm.
like that. Um,
I mean,
and
goodness.
it's really that first book that also gives you a sense of, oh, it's about to go down in the series.
The
Like it's the
movie
shift.
also cuts so many characters, and
Mhm. Yeah.
it cuts a lot of scenes because they cut these characters. So like Ludo Bagman, Dobby, Winky.
Hmm.
There's one other character that's in it that I can't think of off the top of my head, but it's like they just kind of cut for time,
Hmm.
and that did
Hmm.
kind of bring down the quality of it.
Yeah. But I think it's a great book so far. We're gonna get to Order of the Phoenix next time in our read through, and it's going to be insane as well, because it's going to be interesting to see Spencer read through the Order of Phoenix, because I think it's like, other than, I think he really loved the Chamber of Secrets this read through when he
Hmm.
actually read it, but I think like he really doesn't like Order of the Phoenix because of how long it is, and because he also believes that Umbridge is non-essential and should be cut out of the book.
Oh my goodness.
So
Okay.
I'm really interested to see how Spencer, if Spencer still feels that way after reading Order of the Phoenix
Hmm.
again. Um, but this has been our time on the show of Requirements, a Harry Potter
Yes.
podcast. Cole, thank you so much for joining us
Thank you
on
for
this
having me.
journey, for helping us along as Abby, Spencer, and I have all been out. You've been the constant
I did it.
this season. Um, so we
It's
appreciate
been a lot of
the
fun.
work that you're doing. And so you guys will see Cole again, not on this show, but you will see him on the Star Wars Historian show, as we are about to
Yes.
dive into Rebels as we prepare for Ahsoka season, that series that's starting on August 30th, and that kind of stuff. Um, but until next time, as we cover the Order of the Phoenix for Cole, this is David on the show of Requirements, a Harry Potter podcast. Mischief managed.